I'm always curious about what it looks like when seemingly related and unrelated disciplines come together and synergize to create something new.
Every instrument and most of the music that we're listening to on the radio and on Spotify and on all our devices is using the 440 hertz system. And that was decided collaboratively last century, and then that system was permeated out.
Welcome to the Frequency Files. I'm Sarah Ripper, and this is a place where we explore the pulse of the universe in various forms. Today, we're speaking with a man that I would say is a true polymath, a Renaissance man, musician, choreographer, teacher, sacred geometrist, Enneagram consultant, catalyst coach, martial artist, amongst other things. Corrie Wade is the creator of the Nine Doors Method, a transformational framework that helps people unlock creative flow, artistry, and emotional clarity, as well as a deeper self-awareness. He brings this grounded and intuitive approach to what he does to really support people to move through inner blocks and step into their fullest expression. He draws from a rich background of skill sets, as I mentioned earlier, and he brings that embodied approach to really invite people to align with their truth and their purpose. And he creates this unique space in person and online where authenticity and curiosity and courage can come together to allow creativity in whatever form to come alive. Corrie, so awesome to have you here today. Thanks for joining us.
Really?
Corrie, you, as I mentioned in the introduction, are somewhat of a Renaissance man because I struggle to think of a label, and who needs labels? But
I like that. Renaissance man. That's good.
okay, I'm glad you're happy with that. I'm I'm really curious to unpack a bit of your life and your career journey because it is very eclectic and that's what makes it beautiful. Tell us a little bit about your journey so far.
So far, how far back do we go?
Whatever you want.
Back as we like. I finished uni with a science degree and then became a dancing numerologist. At, that's kind of a very quick way of saying it. Yeah, so every step of this journey has been quite often been a surprise, getting to the next part. But it's all been, if I look at it from, if I zoom back, it's all been from a natural place of exploring passions and things that interest me and bringing those multiple modalities into play and eventually overlapping them, rather than having all these disparate interests journeying out there and taking me in different directions, starting to see the synergy or the ability to overlap all these different parts. And so what at first glance is quite a few disparate interests, from dancing to numerology to sacred geometry and physics and quantum mechanics and back again, have and psychology and coaching people, have all started to weld together into a greater dialectic, if you like.
Mm,
Mm.
mm. Having known a little bit more deeply about your journey, that's a very succinct way of putting it. And I love that about how eloquently you describe to look at these eclectic spheres of disciplines or areas of study. And for some minds, seeing the interlinks are where
Mm.
innovation and magic happen and continue to
Mm.
happen. And we see that everywhere.
Absolutely. And this idea that 1 + 1 = 3, when we overlap, when we synergize or find relationships between our various interests. Yeah.
Yeah. You've more recently developed this method, the nine doors to creative mastery. How did that come about?
Well, on one hand, I'm an Enneagram consultant. So the Enneagram is this amazing cosmological and psychological map that's been welded together that helps people see that there's different ways of approaching life and that we have different personality types evolving out there. So whether we come in through the cosmology angle or the psychology angle, it's this really interesting map of human consciousness and how we're each fundamental personality has different approaches and different value sets. So I'm a Enneagram consultant on one hand, and then I'm a teacher of quite a few modalities on the other. And at some point, I started to overlap those two realms together and consider that I could teach from a place, a holistic, using the Enneagram as a map. I could use that as a holistic way and a very creative way of approaching teaching different things. So music, for example, or creativity, and use each of these nine. The Enneagram means nine in Greek, Enneagram, nine-pointed star. Use each of these doorways, if you like, as a way of approaching a modality, for example, music, and then having nine different musicians or musician types that I explore over time with my students. And so they get a holistic way of approaching their musicianship. So it's been evolving for probably 25 years with all the different ways I tend to approach things, but it's been consolidated in the last few years. Beta testing students, beta testing teachers, doing it within my studio, doing it in online capacities, and then now bringing it into the digital space and having it not only in my studio where I can offer it one-on-one or into groups, but a digital platform that people are going to start to access this program, as you put it,
Mhm.
into the wider world. Yeah.
Amazing. Can we know a little bit more about why nine and where did the Enneagram come from?
Ooh, that's a there's some big questions in there. The modeling is, and imagine if you had nine people standing in a circle and that you put
Yep.
something in the middle of that circle, that they're each looking at that thing from nine fundamentally different points of view.
Yep.
And I remember back as early as early teens, I was interested in why, trying to understand why people were they the way they were, and myself as well, and trying to understand my place in the world and self-inquiry. And I looked at lots of different systems for that. So there's personality profiling systems out there like Myers-Briggs and a whole cohort of other systems. But what I love about the Enneagram map is that the model is that it's a holistic framework. It's self-contained, very three-dimensional or fourth dimensional if you want to go there. But it is a holistic map that's interrelated. So these 9 points relate to each other in a particular way. There's all this sacred geometry going on the inside. And so it's not just arbitrarily nine. It's a specific number that kind of points at the mathematics and the shape of things that are going on in the background. So nine basic numbers gives you all the numbers that you need, right? Once you get to 10, then we compress it down to one again. One plus zero equals one. So there's nine fundamental numbers, nine fundamental access or nexus points that we can frame and explore from there. And the Enneagram map, the name Ennea is Greek, but within that map, there's a triangle and a hexad and a circle, and each of them point to all these pathways and corridors that kind of connect each of the 9 points together in a very specific way. So the map is very old. It's at least 1,000 years, but you could say it's probably a lot older than that. And the human intervention on that has been going on for a while. And the psychological intervention or coalescing of psychology and cosmology, unifying it into the Enneagram map that we know today, has been going on since the middle of last century. And it's, yeah, used extensively out there in psych circles and big business, profiling your clients, profiling your staff, for example. So the Enneagram, there's a whole world out there of the Enneagram. And now I bring music and creativity into that pedagogy, if you like, the way of exploring a unified map
Mm.
for exploring a mode, a craft, or a
Yeah.
passion. Yeah.
Amazing.
Mm.
What sort of learnings, results, or aha moments have you seen people have by having this really unique system that blends creativity, cosmology, and personal development frameworks?
Mm. The idea that you can actually that there's a holistic approach to music is unique for a lot of people, and that we can discover that not everyone's versed in the realm of personality types, that they can discover their own personality type as they do the program with me, And when they finally figure out what their personality type is, that can take 10 minutes or 10 months. They also discover which of the musician types they're most likely to gravitate towards. They're not stuck inside that type, just most likely if someone's a 5 type in the real world, they're probably going to groove to the 5 type musician who's all about theory and insight and patterns and puzzles and figuring things out. So it's a personal map for self-exploration, but then when we put it into the music, it's also a way of crafting it and going, well, this is where I'm likely to thrive and flourish, and also to know where my blind spots are too. So in terms of aha moments, that's what I love about the work that I do. They're happening all the time.
Mm.
Um, but people discovering their personality type, and also people consciously choosing. So within the program, the first level is everyone meets over 3 to 6 months. You meet every musician and develop skills and craft and tools and techniques across all the 9 musical types. Well, if I take a step back for a moment, I've studied music around the world, and basically I've poured all the different pedagogy systems and the ways that I've seen that we approach learning music, and I've put that into the Enneagram circle. And they just find a place because these aren't arbitrarily defined. They're archetypal doorways, if you like, or truths, if you want to think of it like that. And so what happens is when my students work with me, they get to explore all those different ways of seeing music initially, from the improviser to the reader to the technician, all the different components, the ways we can approach and create music. And then once they graduate level 1, they get to choose which musician they want to work on for 3 to 6 months. Where's their focus? What project that we're going to do inside one of those musicians particularly. And aha moment for me is that not always people don't always choose the musician type that they are their personality type. They actually often are choosing musician types where they know the lack. They can
Mm.
see that, oh my God, I never knew that technique and drills and skills and all that sort of stuff could elevate my playing so quickly. And also that I feel really weak in that area, so I'm going to do that. So I mean, that's an aha moment for me, that my students often are choosing to work inside a musician type that is least familiar with them, because they're craving the expansion.
Yeah. And they obviously feel safe and confident that you can hold them in that expansion.
Hmm.
So that's testament to you too. From the little I know about the way you teach music, Corrie, you have a really different approach. And possibly if people have learnt music in a quote unquote traditional way, yeah, they'd see it really differently. What's going on in the world of music teaching and what's possible there?
You like asking some big questions. Well, when people come to my door, and they ask, for example, they're asking about piano lessons, because I do all instrument coaching too. So any instrument that walks in the door, if they've got pre-knowledge, then I can put them into the program. But piano lessons from the ground up. And um, when people are asking about what I do here, one of the first things I will say is it's non-traditional. It's very creative. It's lots of fun, amazing results up front, but it's a different paradigm that we're going to sit in. And people often come to my door with a set of values and beliefs that they don't even know that they have. They'll say, I don't know anything about music, but then they'll come with a whole host of values and beliefs about how music should be, or how it should be learnt, or what their relationship is to music, and they haven't necessarily done training. So that I find fascinating, and that's part of the greater conversation, the unconscious conversation about how music is approached in the West, at least, and how we relate to music. So often people are relating to me, I'm not musical. And then I'll ask, have you done any music lessons? Oh, no, no, but they know that they're not musical. And so operating inside of those structures is really interesting, because they don't even know that they come with these beliefs about themselves and beliefs about how music might should be. Like reading, for example, in the traditional approach, reading is one of the primary doorways in. But the approach that I take inside of this program and some other systems around the world are starting to go in that direction too, is more the play-based approach, which is you play first and then the theory and the technique and stuff come in time. come later. And so it's based off how we learn our language, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which has a huge success rate as opposed to a huge fail rate inside the more traditional systems.
And that, I love that you alluded to that innate musicality
Mm,
that all humans carry within them. What is the relationship between music, creativity, and consciousness?
God, another huge question. Say that again. What is the relationship between music, creativity, and consciousness? Let's say creativity, they often come with beliefs about how creative they are too, and that
Yeah.
they're not creative. And perhaps it's a thing in Australia or it's a part of the Western culture too that we're not creative, but we're creating our reality all the time. So this is talking about consciousness now too, because what we believe and what's cooking on the inside manifests and on the inside, on the outside, and then reinforces the internal story, and then there's this toric field or torus that happens between you and reality that you're feeding. So from that perspective, we're deeply creative. We're creating our reality all the time. But I would say music and creativity often seem to have this relationship, at least in Australia, that there's either a fear of it or a disconnect from it or a belief that I don't have it. I don't have that capacity. So that's part of what I love doing when I'm teaching, is that helping people catalyze their experience of their own creativity very quickly, quite often.
Yeah.
It depends on how entrenched they are when they arrive.
Mm,
Yes.
mm. But the dismantling of that is incredibly powerful because it is, as you said, like we are creators, we are constantly in a process of creation. We just have preconceived ideas about what that is, how it has to happen, what it has to look like. Yeah, the deconstructing of that and the providing that space for people to reconsider and try on in a safe way, like, is really powerful.
Mm. And that's what I love about the work. I'm holding space. I'm as much a coach and holding space for people as I am a teacher. And I can't imagine teaching without that holding space framework that I love to hold for the student. And in the coaching circles, we have a phrase, "I'll believe in you until you do." And we don't necessarily say that to the client straight out of the gate because they've got to have an experience. But I'm holding a belief for them that they are capable of amazing things until they start to have their own experience of that. And you can tell them, but they have to have an experience. So
Mm,
yeah.
yeah, and then they've got that imprint of possibility.
Yes. Yeah. So like a client who sticks their head in my door and says, "Hi, I want piano lessons. I want to be able to read any music, any sheet music." That's my intention. I want to be able to read sheet music. And then 3 months later, the same client turns to me with tears in her eyes and says, "I don't actually think I need to read music anymore, or it's not the primary goal for me. I love creating and I will continue to learn to read, but oh my God, I can actually play music without it being reading being the sole focus or sole way of creating music." Um, yeah,
Mm.
but these things have to be experienced.
Yeah, and sometimes broken down to be reconstructed.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Corrie, you've mentioned before about your mathematical background, scientific background, and obviously your music. How
Mm.
does that play into the sacred geometry story and how that plays out? For example, 432 hertz.
Yep. Here are several questions in there. The 432 hertz. For those who don't know what the 432 hertz conversation is, basically, if you play the A in the middle of the piano, in the middle of a piano, it's most likely going to be 440 hertz, vibrating 440 times per second, 440 hertz. And at some point in the last century, there was over time that there's been a lot of changes and steps to get to where we are musically today and how music is shaped, and a lot of amazing minds and a lot of different theories have all woven together to get us to this point today on how music is is understood universally, and the rules and systems that we operate from. And so this is known as tuning. Every instrument and most of the music that we're listening to on the radio and on Spotify and on all our devices is using the 440 hertz system. And that was decided collaboratively last century. And then that system was permeated out. But prior to that, in different areas, there might have been 432 hertz or 441 hertz, or different groups of people were using different tuning systems. And so what would happen if they got together, it wouldn't work because they'd be slightly out of sync, like a radio dial that's quite just slightly off. If you're just a few hertz off, that makes all the difference between a good song and you have to turn it off. It doesn't feel good. So the 432 hertz is a conversation about the current system we have is 440. There are some in Europe, there are some places that are beginning to change, and actually they all agree on 444 hertz. That's a brighter energy, but there's also a movement around 432 and a conversation that perhaps 432 is more in sync with us as biological frequency creatures, and that frequency is everything. So perhaps there are some frequencies that are better suited for us and some frequencies that are slightly out of sync. And so the rabbit hole of 432 is that there's a controversy that the 432 is better for us, and that 440 was deliberately chosen as a way to disenfranchise from the natural harmonics of the planet, basically. And so when we're playing in 432, we're more in sync with the actual frequency of nature and life around us, and that frequency is better for us. So there's quite a few players on the main stage who are creating music in 432 hertz now. And I have musician friends that say that when they play in 432 hertz, that they notice a difference in the crowds when they're performing. And the beauty of having, say, digital pianos is that I can tune 432 at the drop of a hat. So most of the time my instruments are 432, except for when I'm creating video content, because most people don't have access to that shift yet. So I don't want to create content that's going to be slightly out of sync for their 440 hertz pianos, for example, and I'm at 432. So most of the videos I'm creating at the moment are 440, but that's an interesting point to make, that maybe I will make a 432 hertz collection at some point, and that could be an exploration. And it just takes time for these things to change, if it's going to change again. So does that answer the question? There's controversy about it. There's a suggestion of 432 is better for us, and I have quite a few muso friends, and myself included, that feel that I can tell there's a difference. There's something else going on, and I even have students that come in, and I've detuned my piano to 440 because I was playing with some other musician, instrumentalist, and they say it's not at 432, is that they can tell. They can tell.
Wow.
Yeah. And the general conversation is that 432 is more congruent, more in sync, less of a radio knob slightly out with us in the natural world. Yeah.
Amazing. And is it too rabbit holey for me to ask why 432 and why A?
Oh, well, okay. Well, we could use it. We could use any other note on the piano. We would just have to say what that frequency is of the C note, for example. That conversation about why A would be talking about how music was arranged in the first place, and how the church had some impact on the codification of music, and how Gregorian chants were written in the minor, in Aeolian minor. So that's that conversation. Why 432? I'm still exploring that, but I did cross paths with a different tempering system. I know the feeling of it, and I definitely have a 432 hertz studio when I can. But I have recently crossed paths with the science and the mathematics behind 432, that for the first time actually articulated it in a way that I could logically follow. And so I'm still exploring that, but it's around tempering. And for anyone who knows what tempering is out there, that's a big, huge conversation about how music has arrived to where it has today. But there's a different tempering system being suggested that's in alignment with 432, and that suggests possibly why 4032 is actually more harmonious and congruent for us. So I'm still on that track.
Yeah, cool. Keep us posted.
Posted. Yes, there'll be posts about that at some point. I'll make a note. I have 1,000 ideas. I've got them all written down. It's just every time I think of something like that, I just write it down, and it's scheduled for months from now when I have time to create that content.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
So many people are visioning and designing and building systems that are above and parallel to many of the dominant systems, as you are with music and creativity. Um, what would you say to people who need support in playing their part in co-creating these emerging systems or
Mm.
responses to systems that they don't prefer, that go beyond competition and individualism?
Yeah, I would say follow your goosebumps, follow what excites you. Uh,
Mm,
and if you're doing what you're passionate about, that is a form of channeling. That is a form of fulfillment, a form of life purpose. So if we're following what we believe in and what we're passionate about, and if those two things combine together, then that has a huge amount of momentum and energy behind it that is already propelling you forwards. Follow your
mm,
dreams.
mm.
Can you hear music playing?
Yes.
Yes, I've got a piano at the front of the store, and someone's just parked at the piano and playing
I love that.
background music. Yep.
I
Yep.
love it.
Mm.
Love it. Um,
Yeah, follow your
Corey,
goosebumps. I also love working with people who are doing this kind of thing, helping
mm,
help coach them into those spaces where they can support themselves, to follow their passions and their dreams and their new vision of a more holistic frameworks.
mm,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, I love that. What is frequency to you, and how do you align yourself to an optimum frequency? We've chatted about that a little bit, but curious to know if there's anything else you'd love to share.
Lots more than can be shared on one podcast. Frequency. Well, you could frame frequency as sound. That's frequency. So the impact of music and through that aspect. Um, I remember us chatting about color and music and how they can relate, and
Mm,
that's an amazing, huge topic. You could do a doctorate on this stuff. If you could split me into 50 people, I go on to a doctorate on color and music right now. And I've probably spent a couple of years just doing my own research and studies around that. And sometimes I'm always researching and exploring ideas. And it's at some point in the past, I've had my head just in music and color. Um, but if I was to speak into that for a moment, there's quite a few practitioners throughout the eras who have attempted to overlap music and color together. And there's different systems of doing that and different logics behind it. One system that I really love is imagined. So I've got a piano in front of me,
yep.
but imagine. So we've discovered that a note on this piano is 440 hertz, and that's the speed of sound. It's not very fast. But if we mapped all the way outside of the sound and extended the keyboard out quite a long way, about 40 octaves in either direction, we would cross over the frequencies up high. We would cross over the frequencies of light. And so then what we could do is we could map the color spectrum of light onto that extended piano, that extended keyboard. The piano is basically a representation of Western music theory and evolution over time. So it's a reason why a lot of musicians and composers of other instruments end up on piano, because it's a visual, physical map of how things work. And so if we extend that visual map way out there, eventually we'd be able to lay the visible spectrum over the top of it, and it would fall at some point over those 12 notes. And then what we could do is just flip it back octave by octave and land in the middle of the piano. And suddenly we've got light reduced to sound, and we can map those specific colors to the piano. So of all the different systems I've seen, that's one that I very much grew to, because it's got a theory behind it and a strong logic. So that one I love particularly. There's another system by Richard Merrick, who I've employed quite a lot of his material, and there's no accident that there's 12 colors in the Newtonian wheel and there's 12 pitches on the piano. From C to C, there's 12 pitches, 12 different notes. That's not an accident. There's a big reason for that. It's just like there's 12 hours on our clock, 12 and 12. And so you can map the color wheel to the music theory wheel, the circle of fifths. You can map the colors, the chroma. So in music, we say, when I do all the notes, that's the chromatic scale. Chroma in Latin means color, right? It's all the colors that are being represented. And yeah, it's fascinating to actually apply color theory, of which I've studied, to music theory, of which I've studied, and find one reveals information about the other.
Mm.
Like complementary colors are tritones, the underlying elastic band of music that makes everything function. Primary colors and secondary colors are augmented chords. Tertiary colors are whole tone scales. And so you can think in terms of color as you're playing. And that opens the door to the synesthesia conversation. Quite a few of my clients hear colors, when you're flipping senses. And so there's a few different composers throughout history who perhaps were synesthesiac, and they would speak about certain key signatures being of certain colors. Yeah, so lots of different approaches, but definitely I love the idea that we can think about music in color and attribute moods and hues and tints and speak about it in terms of music.
Yes, I love this. Tell us more, and tell us about this, the musical compass that you developed that connects in with this.
I wove the Newtonian wheel of the 12 colors system into the circle of fifths, and then interlinked those two together. So you could begin to explore, if you know anything about music theory, you could understand color theory. And if you know anything about color theory, you could understand music theory. Or if you're curious about one, you're going to learn about the other. Synergy is the 1 + 1 = 3. Yeah, so there's lots of exploration to be done there. And also that I have, in the process of doing that, created a 3-dimensional version of this system too. So that's on my list of things to publish and get out there. But there's a 3D model of this that's been created in the background that I'm very excited to share. And now that I've said it out loud, I'm going to have to do it, aren't I?
Yep. I'll be your accountability buddy.
Yeah, that's my accountability piece. I have to put it out there. I have so many ideas that it keeps sitting on shelves, that part of this new chapter for me is about actually putting those ideas out there rather than just sitting them on shelves.
What are some inspiring projects or methods or tools that you're currently exploring, or initiatives that you're exploring that you feel are creating positive change, or that are sparking some new level of synergies or potential?
Well, how about I answer that on 2 levels?
Yeah,
I'll fractalize all the way in, because I'm
go
always,
for it.
yeah, and then I'll zoom out, I'll fractal out, I'll pop back out again. So one inspiration today, I've been working with polymodal modulations, been taking 2 different modal systems, one that's very dark and exotic and one that's very light and dreamy, and weaving them together into creating music. So my brain is kind of in that space just a few minutes before I hopped on this call with you. So that's kind of zooming in. I'm just one idea at a time coming through. And if I zoom out, then from my own personal perspective, the Patreon site that I'm currently creating and populating with videos and content from the 9 Doors to Musical Mastery program, that's my passion project, and that's my part of contributing to change and supporting new ways to be creative and approaching ourselves creatively and musically. Basically design your own musical adventure, approach music in a very different way. So that would be pushing out a little bit. Yeah. And because the work that I do is generally one-on-one or in small groups or workshops or weekend events, the idea that I can put the material out there into Patreon and let it go digital out into the wider world, that I'm very excited about, that it can actually have impacts on people, that positive impacts on people that I haven't yet met or may not ever meet. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Broader possibility for people to connect with you there.
Mm. Mm.
Corrie, how do you use and you spoke earlier about following your excitement and your goosebumps. How do you cultivate intuition or your inner knowing?
I think going back to the follow your goosebumps, that's
Yep.
for me. Yeah.
Yep.
If I'm doing what's exciting me and I'm following my passions, then I'm in flow. I'm in the groove, and then I'm channeling more. I'm more connected to my intuition. So I think that would be a big part of that answer.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
To finish off, as a guide who empowers people creatively, practically, spiritually as well, what would you say to someone wanting to cultivate more harmonic frequencies in their life?
Play music. Yeah, well, yeah. Well, I would say, to go back to an earlier part, if you have to follow interests, and I understand that perhaps not everyone in the world wants to learn music, and that's fine. But what I'm really interested in doing is engaging the people that say they want to but believe they can't. And so I would check any limiting beliefs you have about yourself, and ask for someone that you trust, who is a living epitome of something that you would love in your life, whether or not that belief is true. Um, because doing the good work also means addressing the unconscious motivations and beliefs that kind of guide us away from our potential grand possibilities.
Yeah.
Yeah. So harmonically, there's lots of practices, but I would, I would ask two questions. What could you do if you had no limitations? And then, are those limitations real? Mm.
Love that. Corrie, any final thoughts before we say goodbye?
Final thoughts. How about I just play a little song? I'll do the
Sure.
polymodal modulation stuff
Yeah,
I was doing
let's do it.
2 minutes before I hopped on a Zoom call. So I took Amazing Grace and put it into Phrygian, nice and exotic. Yeah, this is the start of it. Phrygian Grace.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Corrie.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Very interesting to be in an interview and answering these questions with you. Thank you. Yeah, I love the questions. They were big.